Hello again. So this is the third episode in my development diary on the game Fragile Existence, what will eventually be a space strategy RTS style 4X sort of fleet survival game. Right now we're at the stage where I'm just designing planet types and sort of seeing how the ships interact with those planets and sort of developing the UI so that it works around everything else, along with the camera system. So the next planet type I decided to go with was a ringed planet. So this is Saturn. The shader on the planet is the same, but I had to develop the shader for the rings, and this just uses a texture of the Saturn rings themselves. This would need to be procedural at some point so that I can generate different types of rings. I was experimenting with the shadows and how they look on the rings, the shadows coming off the planet itself. Even without soft shadows enabled, it looks pretty good. And this is double-sided as well, so we see it on both sides of the plane. And I think the way the sun reflects on the rings looks pretty good. It doesn't necessarily hold up once you get the camera really close to the ring layers. Ideally, we'd have some sort of particle system in there that shows the light reflecting off the little chunks of rock that are actually in the rings, but it's a good first pass, I think. And camera controls still as they were before. You can zoom in and out, and what you might see is up in the top left corner we've got a little icon representing the planet type. We also have a title bar, so this will be where the menu items would be, and your resource numbers that your fleet currently has. And so far the only thing I've actually put in here as a placeholder is the total number of people in the fleet that you have left. So you have 12,614 people left, and as you lose people, that number goes down and life gets more difficult. So you're in battles with other ships, or you send people down, do dangerous mining jobs, or people get injured and you don't do anything about it, then you start to lose people. That's bad for your fleet. Okay, so what I've also sort of been working on, as before, we can place ships. I'll just place a few, and I've now developed some sort of like navigation lights, much like you'd see on aeroplanes or large boats. They have the red and green light for port and starboard, and they also have little flashing collision lights. So I've implemented that on the hauler model. Not quite done the actual flashing strobe lights on the liner model yet. The lights aren't necessarily visible from too far away, but I think it gives it a slightly more realistic look. And when the ship is in the darkness, you can still sort of see it a little bit, mostly the red and green lights. So in terms of a design choice for the aesthetics, I've decided I would ideally like that the planets retain their really dark shadow region. So I think in terms of what you'd be able to do in the game, like hiding in the dark side, like the far side, well, the dark side of the planet, could actually be kind of fun. There could be some sort of mechanic around that. You could be able to turn off the lights and actually shut down your power to the ship, and maybe you could hide in the darkness. I think that'd be pretty cool. I think in terms of aesthetics as well, I think there's no other game that really tries to go for realistic solar systems and still make a game out of it. So I think it could be an interesting choice. I'm going to stick with it. We definitely still need some emissive textures. I mean, we need textures in general, but I'm reluctant given that I know that the models will probably be replaced at some point, or at least reworked. Beyond that, you may have noticed that up here we now see icons for the ships that we've got in orbit. So the idea is that this is actually a sort of fleet inspector window, or a graphical user interface section. So you can actually click on each of the ships and it takes you straight to that ship. And conversely, if you click on these, you'll see the relevant ship is highlighted in the top corner. And the idea is that you'll have more planets listed down here as you discover them in the solar system. There'll probably be like a little indicator to show that there are planets, but you don't know about it yet. And you'll be able to double click on the planet and it'll actually take you to that planet, presuming you have a ship in orbit, and actually be able to view it. So that's sort of working towards being more than just one planet in the solar system. So you'll have a whole list here, and you can actually see at a glance which ships you've got where. And there'll probably be some sort of extra information over the top of these icons as well that tells you what the ships are actually doing. You'll note that the bottom left ship interface hasn't actually changed that much. I did change the icon for the computer, so now it's like a little processor chip. I think that looks a little bit better. And I do have a handle that lets you set the energy level that you actually want. So if you say that the bar is 100%, then you'll be saying, I want it to run at 20%, 40%, 60%, etc. So you'll actually be able to sort of only power as much of the engine as you actually want. So these two components would be depowered in this case, and you'd actually use less fuel. Okay, so the actual rate of fuel would diminish appropriately. I've also added a little icon down here which shows you how many people you have on the ship available. And the idea is you draw from this number for each of these ship components. You can actually train people in each department, and you'll get little abilities in this space here that allows you to do things with each individual ship component, assuming that it's powered. And the idea of this top bit here is this is actually the hit points of each component. So you'll be able to target each individual ship component. I'll see the enemy will be able to do the same for you. And you'll actually be able to see this sort of be reduced. At the moment it's just a slider that sort of reveals the graphic behind it, but I'll probably do something a bit more fancy than that. So that's the idea with these big sort of bars, because you're probably thinking, why are they so large? But there is a purpose to that. So some of the UI systems are coming together now. Perhaps the big thing that I've been working on this week is being able to actually go down and view ships at a sort of what I call the focus level. So we have a few ships here, and what we can do is double click and we go down into the focus camera system. So you can actually zoom in. There's 3 levels of zoom here, and you can actually hop between quite easily. The transition's a little bit jarring at the moment. I still need to work on that, although I kind of think it looks kind of nice. And you can do the same from this UI up here. It actually takes you straight to the ship that you double click, and you can zoom back out and you can zoom down. That transition from the planet to the focus camera is a little bit off, but it's tricky because the Cinema Machine cameras like the world up to be in a certain direction, because we're zooming so that we're in sort of a local reference frame for each ship. The up direction is actually all the way over there, and the camera tries to rotate with upwards being upwards, so we sort of have to fight it a little bit. But I mean, I think that looks fairly good. I'm very happy with how the lights look in 3 dimension. The actual lights are just a particle system. That's actually a single particle, just strobing, and the navigation lights are a couple more particles, but they're all pretty friendly in terms of performance. Of course, I hit a little snag when I introduced the focus mode. I realized that my my thruster effect didn't sort of hold up once you can actually see it up close. So I had to sort of have a look at that. And so I rebuilt that, and we'll see in a moment when the engine kicks on. I'm thinking I might actually introduce some other lights here that show when the ship's turning, sort of like, telling the other ships around it, get out of the way, much like a plane would on the ground nowadays. Right, so you see I've added a sort of like another layer to it where there's actually a sort of bulb of light just around where the engine is. And so now you can't actually see where the trail renderer begins, because otherwise it tries to sort of accommodate the camera direction. But that's sort of hidden behind that big sort of bulb of light. I think it looks pretty good. So there are still some problems you can see here, I guess, in terms of the sheer darkness that the planet can go into. Even with the running lights here, and that engine's powering down, it can be quite difficult to see things, I think. So they definitely need more light or some sort of system that helps me to see things. I've been working on a sort of, how can I call it, a ship indicator system. So it's like a billboard that goes over the top of the ship and turns to face the camera direction. And so that will actually have more information that you'll be able to see from afar, and you'll just be able to hold down a key and you'll be able to get that status information about all the ships up here, regardless of whether they're on the dark side or not. But yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty productive week. I've definitely introduced a lot of new systems that are sort of waiting to be developed further. I was hoping to get the third ship finished this week. I do actually have a design for it that I quite like. It's going to be the sort of the warship. It'll be the first military ship that I'm working on, and it'll be the first ship that actually inherently has weapons. So it'll have turrets that can rotate towards the target, and it'll have a forward-mounted like a particle weapon. So you'd actually have to orient the ship in a certain direction in order to be able to use that. So hopefully I'll be getting that done this week, and then I'll be able to start playing around with targeting and some very basic combat mechanics, which is quite exciting. Now beyond that, I also need to work on what resources are going to be in the game beyond people. So the idea currently is that there will be sort of, I don't know, 10 or so main resources, and they'll just have a color. And it'll be a little bit like Magic the Gathering, in that you have to have a certain amount of each of the ore types in order to produce certain things and to develop new technology using those particular ores. So yeah, obviously I am a bit sketchy about that at the moment, because I'm sort of trying to think that through. And at some point we need to be able to interact with the planets and actually get those resources. I'm going to try and be realistic in terms of where you get resources. So rocky planets will be where you get a lot of your ores, but gas planets can also have uses, because you'll get things like fuel and maybe other types of gases that you desperately need. And so that's it really for this week. I say it's been a productive week, and I'm hoping that there'll be many more of those ahead. And thanks for watching. See you again next week.